Hi, today I'm going to be talking about climate change. Climate change is one of the most discussed topics in today's world. You hear political leaders talking about it, you see it on Facebook, you maybe hear it in a restaurant, it's literally everywhere. Today I want to focus on not so much the debate on whether climate change is real or a hoax, but more along the lines of actually understanding the scientific process behind climate change. Many people will just say, oh yeah, the earth is getting warm, so climate change is either real or it's not real. The scientific process behind climate change is actually fairly easy to understand, but with all of the debate and right-wing, left-wing discussion, it's hard to understand how climate change actually works. So today I'm going to walk you through essentially a three-step process into understanding the scientific process behind climate change. I'm going to be using visual aids and hopefully a lot of relatable scenarios that help you understand complex ideas in a more simple way. We are first going to talk about the greenhouse effect and what it actually does and how it works. Then I'm going to introduce fossil fuels, how they're used in today's world and how they either contribute or don't contribute to climate change. And then I'm going to talk about how the greenhouse effect and fossil fuels work together into either contributing to climate change or not. So I hope you find this speech interesting and come away with more knowledge than you had before and are able to make your own decision on climate change once you understand the scientific process behind it. So I'm going to start off my speech with explaining what the greenhouse effect is and what greenhouse gases are. So the greenhouse effect is a system that allows some of the sun's rays to be trapped in the lower atmosphere of Earth. Some of these rays are trapped inside the Earth's atmosphere to heat and sustain life, while other of those rays are reflected back into space. So think of the greenhouse effect as basically a light blanket over the Earth. It naturally occurs. It is what helps us live here. If there was no greenhouse effect, we would not be able to stay in life because our planet would either be too cold or way too hot. So there's three main greenhouse gases that affect. The first and most common one talked about is carbon dioxide. The second one is methane, and the third one is nitrous oxide. These greenhouse gases already naturally occur in our atmosphere. These greenhouse gases are what trap the Earth's sun rays inside of our atmosphere. So if there was no greenhouse gases, there would be no way to either trap heat in our Earth's atmosphere or release heat into our Earth's atmosphere. So I'm sure you are aware of a greenhouse nursery where they actually have a building built in the winter to help plants grow to help grow at a more fast process. So basically what that's doing is the sun's rays are able to get through the shield, the glass part of the greenhouse gas, and it gets trapped in those greenhouse gases cannot get out of the nursery. That's what makes those plants grow inside. So this is just another way to show and to try to explain that the greenhouse effect happens naturally in a lot of ways, or it can be man-made into manipulating plants to grow when they normally wouldn't. It's kind of weird to see petunias or pansies growing in the frost in the winter, especially here in Idaho, because it's cold, so they can't grow because there's no light. So those greenhouse gases and the greenhouse effect can be man-made to actually help plants grow when they normally wouldn't. So that's basically just a general idea of the greenhouse effect. Just think of it as a blanket over the Earth that's naturally occurring. The greenhouse effect is not a bad thing. When it typically is portrayed as one, people think that the greenhouse effect is actually what makes the planet hotter. But in a sense, that's kind of true, but it happens naturally, and so that's what makes it a good thing. If there was no greenhouse effect, there would be no life on Earth. I mentioned briefly the greenhouse gases that already occur naturally in the greenhouse effect. Once again, those are methane, carbon dioxide, and nitrous oxide. So these are the greenhouse gases that we need. Now you're probably at least aware when you hear climate change a lot, you will hear the burning of fossil fuels is contributing or not contributing to climate change. So when you burn fossil fuels, you release carbons and methane and that nitrous oxide into the atmosphere. Now remember what the greenhouse effect does. The greenhouse effect only allows for so much of those greenhouse gases to be reflected back into space. So think of it as, that blanket we talked about, the natural occurring blanket. So when you burn fossil fuels, you create more of those greenhouse gases that cannot be released back into the atmosphere. So that blanket that the Earth is essentially already wearing gets heavier and it gets hotter and hotter and hotter underneath of there because it can't release those greenhouse gases back into space. So essentially, the Earth starts to sweat. The Earth gets hot because all that heat is trapped underneath it. So if you go to bed pretty cold and you put on a lot of fleece blankets, as you go through the night, you get hot. Now that's not your body actually warming up. What's doing is your body is giving off these essential gases, and the blanket is what's trapping them underneath of there. And that's why you get warm when you put on socks, gloves, hats, all of those things. So the greenhouse effect works in the exact same way. So the three main fossil fuels that are burned are coal, gas, coal, crude, and natural gas. Essentially, everything that you do on a daily basis has some type of fossil fuels in it. Your cosmetics, your clothes, your car, any kind of big production company uses them. Fossil fuels are everywhere. They're also contributing to these greenhouse gases. So I fully understand that we live in 2016 and we are a generation of cars, electronics, and cosmetics and all of these things, but they are produced by the burning of fossil fuels, which in turn creates greenhouse gases that are already naturally occurring in the atmosphere. So now that you understand the greenhouse effect and you understand the burning of fossil fuels, let's talk about how the two can contribute to climate change. So we know that greenhouse gases keep the Earth's surface warm and help sustain life. We also know that burning fossil fuels adds carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide to the atmosphere that don't already naturally occur. So we should expect climate change. If the first two statements that I made are true, then that would essentially lead to climate change. We only have so much carbon dioxide and greenhouse gases that naturally occur in the Earth. If man recreates them and adds them to our atmosphere, then essentially climate change would occur. Now, this is probably the number one thing that people are misinformed about climate change. Climate change just isn't the Earth getting warm. There's tons of other things that happen when climate change happens. So extreme droughts, extreme fires, the melting of the ice caps, which is one of the biggest statements that comes with climate change. There's coral bleaching. So coral bleaching is basically, if you even Google a few pictures of the coral now versus what it was 10 years ago, there's no life, they're bleached out, there's no color. So that's another thing that happens. The biggest thing that I always try to say when I'm trying to explain how climate change works is the people that contribute the less are affected the most. So think about the small islands or the small tropical places that don't burn fossil fuels, that don't have cars, that live in essentially little huts right on the edge of the ocean. These are the places that are going to get wrecked by climate change because tsunamis are stronger, hurricanes are stronger, there's a tremendous amount of rainfall. Idaho had one of the biggest fire seasons reported in 2015. So climate change is more than just the heat, the Earth getting hotter. So when you think about all these things, it's very important to know that it's not necessarily just a Republican versus a democratic thing. The science behind climate change is, I feel like, what you need to understand before you can make your own based decision. And I'm in no way trying to sway you whether climate change is real or not. I just wanted to present the facts, the scientific facts behind it. So you know the greenhouse effect occurs naturally. It's what keeps the Earth warm in a natural way to sustain life. You know that burning fossil fuels adds more carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases to the Earth's atmosphere, which in turn makes it hotter than it would be otherwise. So you should expect climate change to happen if both of the first two statements are true. So I encourage everyone to dig a little deeper into climate change. Don't get overwhelmed with it. It can seem like it's super complex, it's super maybe out of your league to understand, but it's really not. Once you understand the burning of fossil fuels and the greenhouse effect, you will be able to make your own decision on whether climate change is actually happening or not happening. And if you decide that it is happening, there's a lot of ways that you can go about maybe preventing fossil fuels, the burning of fossil fuels from happening. So yeah, I hope that this speech helped you understand it a bit more. I'm going to go ahead and link a few good YouTube videos that explain it a little more fluently than I probably did. And there's also some really great websites out there that you can do more research on it. So I hope everyone is able to make their own decision on whether climate change is real or a hoax based on the scientific evidence and the processes behind it.